My name's Carl Carlson. You can read it up there. What's interesting is Ellensburg Blue, which I kind of like. Hopefully, by the time I get through, you'll learn a little bit about what to look for when you're up at the claims. You'll understand a little bit about what makes the blue. You may understand why it's where it's at. So I try to get something so that everybody can get something out of this. So what happens is, starting out is my first encounter with rocks, I passed the test. I was 5 years old, up on First Creek. Some of you guys know where that's at. And my dad taught me the difference between agate and quartz vein, quartz crystals, and geodes. The next geological class that I took was a whole 4-year college at WSU, and so I do have a degree in geology, which helped me out on understanding the principles of why it's where it's at. So these things are very helpful. I also got into, back to jewelry. I started in the jewelry business in 1972 after I'd gotten my degree in geology. How does the jewelry enter into this picture of all the stuff that I have in my background? I made a lot of rings out of Ellensburg Blue. I did a lot of jewelry work. I also got into gemstones, and gemstones were my forte, and that's what I kind of like. Well, along comes the Ellensburg Blue later on, but this is where to show you what started all this Ellensburg Blue stuff. My grandfather was up there First Creek for about a week, and he found his stone. This is the stone that he found. And you can see it's got some blue to it. We never cut it, and the reason is it's too much fun to play around with, because it's really good on this side. And so my grandfather could never tell my dad where he found it. Approximately 4 years later, my dad goes through that same country on horseback because he wanted to cover more territory. He found this little stone right here. Well, he didn't think too much about it, got home, and that winter he was working down in the basement and he was looking at the two stones. Can you guess what's going to happen? They fit together. So with that, my dad got kind of excited about going back up there. He'd been going up there since 1940, and went up there and found rocks to cut and stuff, and so it's been an ongoing thing for lots and lots of years. So with knowing this background, then we didn't find with my grandfather finding that, my dad finding, there was another friend with him on horseback, and the next day they were in another canyon and they found a piece of Ellensburg Blue. So the area where the two go together, we cleaned that area off except for the one piece that's missing. And this other area where my dad, a friend found it, it took my dad from 1968 to 1981 to find the blue. And so this is where we staked the claims in 1981, staked a couple more. In 1988, we staked 3 more. And so what happened in 1988, we found a little tiny piece the size of your fingernail in a road that was designed for forest fires and stuff like that. And from that particular one, we've gone down 25 feet in that road. And every time we leave it back in the condition that you can drive across it and you didn't know we were really digging there. That's what the forest had us do. And in that one there, we found all kinds of veins of Ellensburg Blue. And so you can see just a tint of just some things going on, and I will get into that here in a moment and so forth. But what was interesting was that the Ellensburg Blue was generally in rhyolite. With the rhyolite there, that's where it was easy to start to find the blue, because again, that rhyolite breaks down into that brownish yellow, and you'll start to see on some of these stones coming up the color that you need to look for. The rhyolite, all the veins that came up are near vertical. These veins go north 50 degrees east. And it just so happens that First Creek goes in north 50 degrees east. And First Creek, with LiDAR, you can see where it goes right up the mountainside, kind of a little bit of a fork in it. But then you go to the other side, and directly following the creek coming up this way, there's a creek going off on the other side. Well, when I worked for a mining company for a couple of summers, we used contour maps and looked for these things to where a stream would come up and you would find a stream on the other side going down. Because this tells you it's a major fault that goes through there. And so the major fault was the source that brought that solution up from depth, which was a rhyolite, and brought it up, and so as it came up, then it solidified. And what happened was that there was 3 different areas that we dug. So this is where I'll be showing it as we kind of come through here. The problem that I had a long time ago is, what is the color of the blue? How do you define Ellensburg Blue? Nobody really tells you, but if you look at the name, it has to be a blue agate that you found in Ellensburg area. If you can see Ellensburg from the top of the mountain, it's going to be an Ellensburg Blue. So we all see blue different. And what happens too is that even when we were cutting these stones, we thought we had a nice blue, and we cut it and turned gray. The coloration is a reflective color in the stone. With magnification, and this is where the gemology portion comes in, I had a binocular microscope. I could see 10 power to cut up to 50, but I only needed a 10 to 20. I had fiber optics, I had daylight, I had polarized light coming through, and so I could start to see exactly where the blue would be in the vein. And sometimes it was just a small little 2 millimeter portion in a vein that was probably an inch thick. Other times it was the whole vein, and you'll be seeing some of that coming up. So this is where with that came across 2018. Wes Engstrom, guy known in Liberty, has written on Liberty Gold and stuff like that. He came up to mining claims and met me for the first time. And after we got to talking, he says, you're going to have to write something or do something on this Ellensburg, because I slept off for a lot of years because nobody was asking me. And I could identify stones based on inclusions. So by that time, I probably had 100 or more, hundreds of stones already cut. And so I could compare the stone, the fact that finished with what I had. I could compare inclusions that were in the ones that we had to what whatever the other one that we have or doesn't have. So I used what I had found and the sitch and the characteristics that I found, and that's how I would grade whether it's an Ellensburg Blue or not. But even if I graded Ellensburg Blue, nobody else would know the difference if they went to California. What's this Ellensburg Blue? It's just a blue chalcedony. And so blue chalcedony is not a real expensive stone, but it can be, and some really good stuff. But the Ellensburg Blue has that little extra color to it. And so what happened when I came across Carl Carlson He was a professor at Central in 2015. He was actually in charge of the geology department. He wrote an article on the Blue Agate of Kittitas County in Central Washington. And so what I learned from that fit with the things that I've been seeing with the Ellensburg. And so what he did, he had more play toys than I did, so he could use the X-ray diffraction, and he had an electron microscope. He actually looked into the stone. And the chalcedony for this agate is fibrous. They call it cryptocrystalline, but it's like a fibers in there. And there were the tiny little round spheres. And he couldn't determine what it was, but sometimes it'd be 35% of the stone with tiny little spheres in it. But it would only be in the blue portion and not the gray portion. And so it turns out those spheres are 1/10 the wavelength of visible light, which reflects blue just like it does in the sky. So to me, those little spheres are what were creating the blue. And I've had stones where I've cut them, and it looks just fine, but then it breaks in half. One side is blue and the other side is gray. And we didn't know at the time, because this is stuff that I've learned later on after my dad had cut hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stones. But what would happen with him, you had so much material, if it didn't cut out, goes in this bucket, that's just the junk stuff. But I learned a lot of stuff, interesting stuff, from going through that junk box and so forth. So when you understand the color, it's reflective. But what I did do, he said that the more spheres, the more blue. He also said the spheres were silica. So what happens is that he said silica. Thermal conductivity measures how heat travels in a stone. I used it for identifying gemstones because I never became a gemologist, because the solution that's used to measure the refractive index in a stone causes an iritis problem in my eye. So for 3 to 4 months, I can't use that eye. And it's kind of like I need that eye for breathing and stuff like that. So once I found that out, and in the store, you will not open one of those bottles and not tell me about it. You'll open it, but you'll shut the door and don't let me in the room. It's just the fumes will do it to me also. So I had to figure out other way. But thermal conductivity is ideal because, again, you can see, you can differentiate between a garnet and a spinel and a ruby and a pink and a red tourmaline, just on the basis of that. So I learned a lot about that. So what happened was that when my cousin got in one of these thermal conductivity tests, there's a new one. And so I thought, I'll check my stone. And I never did prior, and I did, and I checked it. And I was going to tell him, you're going to have to send this back because it doesn't make it up to quartz. And so I thought, let me check some others, and the more blue, the farther away from quartz that it was. And it starts over here where it doesn't conduct any heat, goes clear over like this where it conducts, and that's diamond. And this quartz is about a third of the way up, and it's a little bar through there. So what happened is that on some of the Ellensburg Blue, you check them on the top. The Ellensburg Blue, you check them on the back. They're not, because my dad cut through the center of the vein, and I'll show you how he did it. And the bottom portion is just nothing but gray quartz. So it's a tricky little thing that unless you got magnification to check out exactly what you're testing, you'll get some results that are different. So from that, I figured that those turn out to be water spheres. And the reason is water doesn't conduct heat. But having the Ellensburg Blue not conduct the heat through the blue, but on the gray just touching it, it goes all the way up into quartz. If those were silica, then it would go all the way up into quartz. So my reasoning, that's why I come up with blue. The professor didn't say water, I say water. So now you know. And that way if you have whoever you want to go with, you can go with and so forth. But I use that quite a bit for me to find out exactly which one of these little veins in there is the blue. This is where I covered what have we found. All the 3 particular areas that we found all line up with north 50 degrees east. The veins that are in each one of those line up north 50 degrees east. On one of them we had to go down 12 feet to find a vein. That's in the part where everybody's digging. On the upper one there, We were finding it clear down at 20 feet and 18 and 15, and so you know that pretty much goes right up through there. So what that is a major fault that goes through there, and that's where geological speaking, that was something, and it goes up through, the rhyolite goes up through the Teanaway basalt. And the old way of teaching is that it's all found in Teanaway basalt in the nodules, but we've never found it that way. But we found the Ellensburg Blue in the rhyolite going up through the Teanaway basalt. So, kind of interesting. Of course, that's where one time I showed Nick, I had a geode that came out of the Teanaway basalt. And we just happened to cut it open just out of curiosity. And it was filled up in the center with Ellensburg Blue. So whatever path the Ellensburg Blue could go to, it went to. And when it was in there, it was a real clean stone, so things got filtered out. When it comes up on some of these other places, this is where too the flow structures will make it look more of a baby blanket blue. The gel that's alongside will make it look really pretty when you cut it. It gives you more of that depth and stuff like that. So referring to cutting and stuff like that, I think we'll go to these pictures now, because I've been looking forward to the pictures. You have to have the right touch on this stuff. My fingers are big, I hit a couple, and that's the way it kind of goes. These are the stones, these are the colors you want to memorize. Because if you start seeing this color just in the soil, you want to start digging. If you see this color on a rock, you want to grab it before your buddy next door, next to you, grabs it. So he who gets to it first wins. So if you know the color to go to, you can win more often than somebody else. You can divert his attention as you go and grab it, of course, too. These are the stones turned over. So you can see there's some pretty stone. This one here and this, all this is quartz on top. My cousin put this together, and there is blue right here. And if she would have oriented it just a shade better, you would have seen the blue underneath the quartz and up there. And this one here just happens to be part of the light of the box over it. And so that's where too, that part there is man-made with a fluorescent light bulb. As you look at these, look at the shades of colors that you're getting. This is where too, you can see the white coming through here. You can see this is a little darker, clearer blue. Same way with this one here. This is the baby blanket blue here. But what happens, the major blue is right there and right on the edge. And this is the reflection of blue into that layer. So if you were to pick this up, you think, man, that's a good blue, and you start cutting it, you better get the orientation correct, because you're not going to get what you think out of it. And that way you can kind of see, kind of identify which ones are which. The rhyolite, right down here. Goethite is this kind of brownish type stuff in through here, in here. Iron staining is clear up here. And quartz formation is right here. If you look real close, that's starting to look like a little bit of a holly leaf, where the points go out and it's concave in between. That's one of the characteristics of the Ellensburg Blue. When you get under high magnification and you look into it under 10-20 power, you can see these little things floating all through the stone. And so that's what makes it a little bit more hazy, which holds the baby blanket blue color. This one here, first vein that we ever found. So if you want to find where we found this, just go to the end of the road at 113, whatever it is, and go off into the pit. That's where it was found. We quit digging there because the vein was coming underneath the road. And when they put that turnaround in there, they covered up you know, that vein that was at the surface by anywhere from 6 to 8 feet of dirt. So it doesn't work good to kind of dig in that area. But before they put that road in there, we were finding some pretty good stones right where they did the turnaround. So they did that to us a couple of times. There was another spot when you come across First Creek, coming up onto that little bench where that bike trail goes through. There's a little flat. We got some real nice blues off of there. But then when we went back to do some more digging, guess what? They came in with a gravel truck and had about 1.5 feet of gravel all through there because they were making it into a road that they could use all the time. So they were helpful, they just didn't know. But we got some nice pieces. So you can keep that in mind. I just gave you a little something to think about. On this one here, that's not blue. The blue is right up here. This is the quartz type, but that is not blue. So how are you going to tell? Well, because I got thermal conductivity, I can go and check those points to tell. But if you don't have magnification, it gets a little bit tough. You can do it on some of them, but you can't do it on all of them. So the Ellensburg Blue is tricky. Its color is tricky because it reflects back and forth. And this is where too, whatever's alongside of it, if it's dark, it'll make the stone look bluer, then you take it off and it goes gray. And Ellensburg is the only place in the world I know that you can call a gray stone blue. Okay, this was the first vein material that, best vein. This is the one my dad, once he got into that, he started cutting all that stuff and just didn't stop. All the stuff that he found beforehand that were in these 5-gallon buckets, he put out in the barn and left them out there for 20 years or more. And this is where I never knew about it. He didn't tell me everything. And so when he passed away, I cleaned out his area that where he was cutting down in the basement. Every time I went in there, I'd find a little box of rough Ellensburg Blue that he'd sorted out that was pretty and that he was going to cut someday. And so 7 times I went in there and I came out with 7 boxes, and then my cousin said, "Did you check over and around and through behind that?" I said, "No." I went there and I filled up another 5 boxes. So he didn't tell me everything, but it was fun because I was hunting Ellensburg Blues. On this here, what makes this so nice as far as cutting is the absence of things, fractures, and inclusions that would take away from it. And you can probably figure out it'll go and split it right down to the center. Because I always told you that some of the blues would test on the blue on the top, but not on the back. And that's how he did it. That's how he could get the little thicker stones. And also what happens is that on cutting, if you got blue there and you make the stone thicker, it's going to be bluer. So that's how you will go and try to hold the color. If you cut it to a standard size, standard thickness, you're going to lose stuff on the Ellensburg Blue, just the way it's going to be. You still see some of this stuff on the outside edge right here. I have another stone in here that will explain it just a shade better, so as you can tell, hard to cut. This goethite going into the stone, coming down from up there, I had it, I say coming down, but when it was formed, it was vertical. And the material came up through there. And these were just sticking out. And so the blue came around that. What's interesting about this color here, you can see in a little farther, right there's got a fracture behind it and so forth. And so this is where the gel the way I see it, and that's where you can help me out if I see it correctly or not, is that the Ellensburg Blue came in first as a gel, and the gel coated the sides of the vein. And then the liquid came through the center of it. And so what happens is, in order to get these real fine little fibers, you will be seeing them coming up. The only way you can get crystals to form, you got to have stability and very slow cooling over a long period of time. No disruption of anything in there. Well, you take gel and pour water on it, the water's going to go right off it. It doesn't affect the gel. And so that's like a gel. And so this is where you'll see these little white things sticking out. Well, that's where Hoskins brought up a subject. It's called moganite. And he says that in the blue, there's probably about 13% moganite. So what is moganite? Well, when you study on it, it's just about identical to chalcedony. And so the only way you can tell the difference, it'll have a peak of like 495 on the X-ray diffraction machine. What happens though is that over time, the moganite dissolves and becomes part of the chalcedony of the agate. And what was interesting is, like, nobody says exactly what it is. There are big pieces of it. But I came across that when they first found it in 1976, they said it was a fibrous material in or among the fibrous chalcedony. So, to me, when you see these a little bit farther on, you'll see the fibrous little thing following the contour of whatever it's growing off of. And so, to me, that's moganite. Also, it occurs as clumps, little rounded ball clumps type deals. You can kind of see it on the little portions that are sticking out, but I'll get you another one that shows better than that. And the only reason I'm doing this is because it was written in his paper. Had he not said that, I wouldn't have to explain it. So that's the way it is. So what happened too is that sometimes those veins came in, and then what happened is that it got heated up after it got in the area that it's at. And anytime you heat up the agate and start working the temperature up, then eventually what it does is, as it cools down, it creates little fractures in it. And Wes Engstrom did this one where he started out at 400 degrees, let it cool down overnight, and then did it to a higher temperature, and finally stopped at 1100 degrees and cooled it down again. And what happened was that that blue stone turned white. There was no more white in it, and you got these little fractures in it, and it lost weight. If the blue is water, the water's gone. If the blue is water and the water's gone, it's going to weigh less. So from what he found on heating things up and so forth, corresponds to me with the thermal conductivity. So what happens, a lot of these little tiny fractures are just from here up in the blue. And as you heat it up, it will lose color a little bit. And so this could have been a prettier stone, rivaling somebody else that we have up here. But because of the heat, it got toned down, and then you see all these fractures and so forth. So that creates a problem on the Ellensburg Blue too. You can't cut this thing. Pretty good sized piece though. As you can see, I'm holding it in my hand. Breccia. Breccia has to occur when you got hot gases busting through the rock and creating fragments. And then that hot flow of stuff coming up through was followed by the Ellensburg Blue, and it is now the ground mass for the breccia. Well, not very many people get excited about breccia, but this is where too, as geology, breccia starts to indicate there could be igneous body or ore body down below. I was up Lake Chelan, Donkey Lake, go up there, they call it Emerald Park, and I was back up in that country, and I came across the tourmaline breccia, where the rock broke apart and the tourmalines were growing in it. Well, it turns out that is right over that mine, copper mine that was in Holden. And so it was one of the events that came up and so forth. So to me, it's like a lot was going on at that time. I can't explain everything on it, but with it, I just like the breccia, and so that's why I put it in. And the color of the blue is pretty nice. And so that doesn't have the flow structure per se. Somehow it got up there fast or whatever, and but it made some pretty stones. I have competition here in it, people sitting amongst us who has a prettier piece than that. Not to mention any names. The white stuff is quartz. It's not rhyolite. You can see a little bit of rhyolite on the bottom of it there, on the side. Well, what happened, I found out quartz veins were perpendicular to the rhyolite vein coming up. And the rhyolite vein would go through everything. There was nothing in there that stopped that rhyolite with the Ellensburg Blue in it. But the quartz veins were broken apart too, and the rhyolite and the Ellensburg Blue went out into it, but it didn't go out there with a lot of goethite that the other portions have. And so, makes for some pretty rocks, but yours would be better. Okay, this is designs. It's hard to see with all the lighting and so forth. You can see way back into this one. You see here and that, okay. And you can see the design here. This whole thing is a gel. And gels don't have the inclusions in them that the actual flowing part does. So that's why when you cut these buggers, they generally cut out really nice. And so they're more of that lavender type blue that you will find. And so it does cut into the better stuff. And it's just so interesting, some of these. And then also some of that globule back there looks like seaweed, clumps of seaweed back there. Well, mogonite, when it was looked under magnification, sometimes it has these little clumps, little round ball type clumps. So that's why I was thinking that the mogonite was this stuff here, and it's also the fibrous stuff. Now, having to understand all this, it doesn't help you out in finding it or cutting it, except for, yeah, you kind of know what's going on. But for those of us that like rocks and everything, we get kind of sidetracked on some things. Okay, druzy. This piece right here, my dad found it because he'd been digging in the morning, and that's mine. It's like 19 pounds. And he went to lunch, came back, and as he's walking about by where he had been digging, the sunlight went into this fracture, and he saw blue. And so he got kind of excited about that, and it dug out. This is the big piece. The other side was just as big as this one was, but it was broken up. And we made some beautiful jewelry from that stuff because the back portion was really top blue, and then you had the druzy, and that's where, because we made our own jewelry, we would design it such that you could wear the druzy out or you could wear the blue out. And when the druzy was up against you, the pillars that held it kept it from grabbing on clothes or skin or whatever. So you could wear it either way, just depending upon what your mood was at the time. So it was really pretty stuff. Okay. What I have here, this one right here, is daylight equivalent. So that's the true colors. This one here is a different lighting, and you can see it lightens up the blues and lightens up some of those. The white there, it's in a box, and she wasn't paying attention, so the light goes into it and so forth. But anyway, you get the picture that what is the color. It depends upon what lighting you have, what the background is. But it's always going to be a component of blue that's pleasing. This bottom one here, this particular piece is at the center there is just white quartz. The blue is this layer right here, and outside of that is the violet. On Hoskins, he was saying that the majority of the little spheres would be the 1/10 of the wavelength, but violet spheres are just slightly smaller than the quartz, the blue. And so what we have, and a lot of people will just look at as a dark blue. And so to find out what would happen if we just stuck a big bright light underneath it, that's what we did. And what happens is that this part here doesn't stand out with a bright light, but that's a pinkish lavender. And so the only way you can get that is you gotta have the violet underneath it to give it that little red component coming through the blue. And so that's where the best stone, the old timers said, the really good ones, you hold it up to the light and you'll see that pinkish lavender. They call it red, they call it pink. We all define color different. And so this is where two people say, well, if you hold it up and it's red, it's going to be Ellensburg Blue. Don't think so. It has to have components there to get that light to come back to you in order for that to work. So that was what I showed Nick, and he was kind of liking that idea. So I guess I got past screened on that one. So, but he couldn't explain it any other way, so I won. Now, if that light hadn't been so bright, this is the range of colors. This one down here is actually a violet. This one's got a violetish blue, the darker ones, and so forth. Come on, clouds, keep coming, keep coming. The colors get better, but this is Western Washington, so just kind of the way it kind of goes. You can see different shades coming across here. You can see some of these. This still hasn't jumped out. Those three, that one, that one. Okay, all the center type stuff right here. Really nice stones as far as color, according to my eye. So as you look at it, you may agree. You may think it's not quite so well, but whatever. So the range of colors. Threw this one in. What it kind of shows is that the very top stone was found near the surface. The next stone was found probably about 5-6 feet lower. And then the other stone was probably about another 5 or 6 feet lower than that, so you get down low. What happens, you see that the blue, there's more blue here, a little bit more blue, and kind of faded up here, and you got a bigger opening here and a smaller. What happens in geology is that when you have a vein and it goes up and only has so much room to get up to a certain point, that's when you'll find that may not fill the cavity all the way through. And it'll just be little, and the cavity being in the center will be very large with just a little bit on each side. So what I figured from this is the way I figured out is that this blue, this is the very top of the vein. And we have never found any blue higher up elevation than what we found right here. That's us. And we've been over that country many, many times. We haven't even seen the float for this. But when they punched the road through, thank God that they did that, that started showing some stuff, and that's why we started digging there, and that's why we stayed there 25 years every summer, just digging there. It was always productive for us. So I have an awful lot of stones that have been cut. I have samples of stuff that's, showing you here and so forth. Going on, this is kind of like the holly leaf inclusion. And so this is what you'll find. On the blue there would stand out more if the light wasn't on there, but that is what you'll see under high magnification. And so as you look into the stone, if you've got the magnification and you look into a blue stone and you're starting to see these little holly leaf, I've never found it in any other blue. I haven't found it in the holly blue. I've only found it in the Ellensburg Blue, which is a good situation. The other thing too, before I get to the next one, is that you've probably already heard that Angela at Central Washington, before she left, she was doing a study on agates, and I went and I loaned to her, I think, about 65 stones. And not that I'm weighting it my way, I just figured if I'm going to do this, let's just check out the best looking stones. So she got about 65 stones. What was interesting, the first time through, they charged me and I went and did all the work on it, on those stones. And then what happened is that before she got things all lined up or whatever and so forth, the XRF machine went to fluid. And so for 9 months it wasn't around, and then when it came back it didn't measure the same as what we had done previously. So we had to redo all of those stones in order to get that. So I don't have a lot of trust in XRF machines unless you're calibrating them all the time. Because what's the difference? Why all this work and then it goes to fluid and you get it back and it won't duplicate? So this is the joys of modern equipment, that you just have to work through it and so forth. So that's where, if you go to Central, they check your stone out. It has zirconium in it, because that's what they found. Then they're going to call it an Ellensburg Blue Agate. And the zirconium, near as I can tell, is that rhyolite has zircons in it. Zircons are zirconium. And so in the mass of things coming, or the hot solutions coming up, it absorbs some of the minerals from the rock that it's coming up from, and it had the rhyolite in it, the zirconium in it, so that's how it came up with the zirconium. You've heard of bullseye agate? We got a bullseye agate. And here again, you can see the goethite is the center, and you see all those fibers? They all come out perpendicular to the surface. When we come over here, you can really see them, and you see how they come out, but you see these ones floating out here. They sometimes will just come to make a snowflake. So sometimes you can call it a snowflake agate, but it's on the blue. Then what would happen is that some of these that broke off or whatever, those would be incorporated in the flow. And all you see is tiny little long little fibers. Well, you start getting a bunch of those things in there, and you can see the fibers lining up, showing you which way they were going. And so those fibers only occur is that if you have this area where there's nothing else going on, so they can form. And so you get some real pretty pictures. There will be, the plan is, by springtime, Wes is putting together the beauty of Ellensburg Blue. And he got a hold of some of these pictures, and he made these pictures right here. He took the pictures of the material. And he's got a series of the pictures in there, and you'll see all the neat stuff that's happening. He got me to go and write sections up so it explains some things in there. And so the theory that what we wanted to do is have something that the museum can have, that they can go, and if people want to buy it, they have it, which brings more people into the museum. And I've donated like, I think eight pieces, and then a couple pieces of jewelry. So you'll have a display of some of the real pretty blues that have come out of that road area that was spent for 25 years up there. So that's the plan. So you'll get introduction to and explanation of many things on there, plus pretty pictures. And museums like pretty pictures. So that's the plan, so we'll see if that gets through. So now you know about that, you see how it, on the rock, if you saw that, but see, the only reason you're seeing it, my dad would take a lot of the stones and put them in a big tumbler, and the tumbler would get all the country rock off so that you could actually see into it and so forth. So that's why this stuff doesn't hold up out in the field. You can't get to it to see it. So as you clean it up too much, and you end up seeing this. And that's where, if you went to Ellensburg Blue, that's the store that my dad started back in 1942, and I worked there from 1972 to 2013, and my cousins now have it, so it's still going on. And so that's where we'll have a bunch of stones as time goes on and so forth.
You still hang out there?
I will go in when they need help, or they need answers to questions. And once I get in there, it's hard to get out of there, because the problem with retiring, I've got so many friends through the years of all that. I've got 4 generations of family there that I've worked with. And so they see me, I want to talk to him, which is fine. But yeah, I still get in. And for those that you've got a special project making or something like that, if you let me know you're coming over, I can show up. So I will be available. I still like talking to people. And if you like Blue Agate, I like talking to you. So that's the end of that. Yes?
What's the relationship, do you think, with the other blue agate that's all over Tianaway? There's like so much blue agate, it's not quite that blue. It has like the white and black striped stuff. Like, do you know anything about the relationship?
Yes. The other blue agate was formed many millions of years sooner, later, than with the Ellensburg. The Ellensburg came up through everything. So you got Tianaway basalt, you've got all the other stuff, you've got rhyolites over there, but there's no blue, Ellensburg Blue that's come up through some of that stuff. Some people have said farther up on the Tianaway they found blues that they think would rival Ellensburg. But when you start getting the magnification on it and start looking at it, sometimes the colors fade out. They look good to you when you find them in the river, because that'll make them look good. Then you get them home, you think, what did I pick that one up for? So that's where that kind of goes. People have asked about red top. They always ask questions about a stone, but they never show me the stone. And they say, well, we've seen, and people have seen blues that will rival Ellensburg Blue. Okay, show it to me. I was shown one piece that it was found on red top, not where you're finding the geodes and stuff, the boulders of agate or stuff like that, but it was a vein. The vein was in rhyolite, and it had some of the inclusions that the Ellensburg Blue would have. And so, without testing it for zirconium, the stuff that I was seeing, and the guy says, I'm not trying to set you up, but what do you think? So I know I'm being set up. But this is where I can't say different, because that's what I was seeing. So it doesn't matter if it comes in during that mineralization of the Ellensburg Blue. When that came in, whether it's on top or red top or down in the valley or whatever, it's going to be Ellensburg Blue. But if it doesn't have the characteristics or the range of colors, and that's where you bring the stone to the store, and when I lay out another 50 stones of colors, and yours does not match any of those, not likely. So this is where, too, I have ways of checking, but this is where so many people make statements, but they never show me anything. It's easy to make statements. I gotta have the proof before I can say it, so that's why I just say I can't help you out, because show me. And so show me and I'll show you exactly what you, because I can take the binocular microscope at the store and show you your stone on a screen. And so with you seeing it there, and then I can show you the Ellensburg on that same screen. And so now you can see which is what and who do they match or not. So that's the way I've gotten out of it through the years. And the other thing is, this is kind of sneaky, but for those of you that have been in the store, you know there's a counter of Ellensburg Blues. And you sit down at that counter, and you got some polished slabs, and you got rings and pendants and stuff like that. Well, I'll have you sit down there, but I won't come over right away. I said, I got to go check on something, and I will. So I give them about 4 or 5 minutes sitting there with their stone, looking at what I have. And right there, you'll start to see differences of color. You'll start to see absence of intensity, and so forth. And then I will take and point out the different things, how they match up or they don't match up. And so that way they've already created their own stone. They're just hoping I'm going to say it's an Ellensburg. Of course, the first question I ask them is, did you pick it up in Ellensburg? No, my grandfather was a rock hound, and he always went into Ellensburg and he hunted rocks up and through there. It's the same story. Some relative is a rock hound and they got a blue rock. But what I also tell people is that people will go rock hounds. Not that any of you are rock hounds, but rock hounds will go and trade to get something. So sometimes you may have an Ellensburg Blue in that all that rocks, and he traded somebody to get it, but he didn't find it. So it's an interesting stone. All the ramifications and the different things and the different looks and all the questions that are asked. But it's fun helping people out. So any more questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Glad you brought up that point about the little ball with microscopic balls. I've seen those before.
Yeah.
They're just floating around and just suspended.
Yeah. And that's where the fibers are held in places. And so that's why some fibers will have it and some won't. So that's where too, the reflection of the color from one end to the other is there, but the portion that doesn't have those little spheres in it, you don't have it, but the color is reflecting into it. You break it, and you got a gray stone there. You got 2 stones, one blue and one gray. Yes?
Generally speaking, when you do find something that looks like it might be how far deep do you actually really have to go? Depending on if you get, like you said, you get overburden.
Yeah. What happens
In that area.
even my dad, when he would be digging, as soon as he came across the color that we would find Ellensburg Blues in, he would just keep digging and digging and digging until the backhoe won't reach down any farther. But but this is where too, even though it had the color, they weren't always there. But you may find another one over a little farther. And my dads are dads, and I'm very fortunate to have the dad that I did have. But they're hard to tell to do anything. They're going to do what they want to do. And so I told them up there in number 4 that from what he had told me prior, I said, if you just dig starting there and coming across to in between these 2 stumps, you're going to find Ellensburg Blue. Well, he said, well, I want to dig over here first. 3 days later, we still haven't dug that. And so on the 4th day, he took a break. He said, well, can I dig a little bit? Oh, sure, go ahead. I dug there and I found 3 nice blues, right in line, just like I told him. Because he'd already given me enough information about other things he found. And the last one where he found it, and I had it figured out with the compass, this is the way it should be, and there it was. So, you just have to be persistent. But it's fun. And the other thing, my dad would always say, on the purple stones, we found some really purple stones up there, that he would call them purple Ellensburg Blue. But Gemologically speaking, if you do appraisal, then purple is a different color than blue. Purple can go and complement, but when it's just plain purple and there's no blue, you should be calling it purple hybrid. And the purple ones were such that they were more translucent. Sometimes you could see the turtleback in there, which is a Botryeriform, but just you see just the outline of it in there. You get that, and then you also get the heat wave inclusions. And so when we would talk, I say, well, you can't call a graystone blue, call it Ellensburg Blue, so you can't call a purple stone Ellensburg Purple, or Ellensburg Blue Purple, whatever. I never won the argument. Didn't matter though. He was in his 90s, and whatever he says, that's fine with me. So, you got all the information you need to go up there and find them. You understand all about it. You understand the depth. And we have a question. So, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to